There will come a morning, ordinary at first glance, when you wake up and realize something has fundamentally changed. The weight is gone, not buried, not ignored, but dissolved. You don't have to brace yourself for the day. You don't reach for your phone like it holds the answer to your worth. You simply open your eyes and feel light. Not because anything external has shifted, but because internally the war is over. You're no longer at war with your past, with your choices, with the person who left. You've stopped fighting for a place in their world. And in that surrender, you've claimed your own. This isn't the end of the journey. It's the beginning of a new one where healing isn't something you're trying to achieve, but something you're already living. You don't have to prove you've moved on. You don't have to show anyone the progress. It shows in the way you speak, slower, calmer, without the edge of desperation. It shows in the way you love, not harder, but wiser. Not wider, but deeper. You no longer give pieces of yourself to people who can't hold them. You protect your energy like it's sacred, because it is. And you've learned the most powerful truth. Self-respect isn't a reaction. It's a lifestyle. You were never broken beyond repair. You were in the process of being remade. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment you thought you couldn't go on, those weren't signs of weakness. They were the friction of transformation. Like a diamond formed under pressure, you weren't being crushed. You were being compressed into something stronger, clearer, more valuable than before. And now, as you step into this new version of yourself, you understand the pain wasn't punishment. It was preparation. Preparation for a life where you don't settle, where you don't shrink, where you don't beg for loyalty from those who only know how to leave. This is where real power lives, not in dramatic comebacks, not in public victories, but in private consistency. In the mornings you get up even when your heart is heavy. In the nights you choose growth over grief. In the moments you feel the urge to reach out, and you don't. Not because you don't care anymore, but because you care too much about who you're becoming to go back to who you were. That's the silent rebellion. That's the strategy they never saw coming. Not silence as punishment, but silence as reinvention. Not absence as a cry for attention, but absence as a declaration of independence. And the most beautiful part, you don't need their recognition to know you've won. You don't need them to admit they were wrong. You don't need closure from them, because closure isn't something you get. It's something you create. It's the decision to stop waiting, to stop wondering, to stop measuring your value by their silence. Closure is the moment you say, my healing is not negotiable, my peace is non-negotiable, my future is mine. And when you speak that truth, not out loud, but in your choices, the universe aligns, opportunities appear, energy shifts. People who reflect your new frequency begin to show up, not because you're searching, but because you become the signal. You are no longer defined by who walked away. You are defined by who stayed, you. You stayed when it hurt. You stayed when no one was watching. You stayed when giving up made more sense than continuing. And that loyalty to yourself, that's the foundation of everything. From here, you build not to impress, but to express. Not to be chosen, but to be free. And freedom isn't a destination. It's a daily decision. A refusal to let the past dictate your pace. A commitment to live not in reaction, but in intention. So keep going. Not because it's easy, but because you've come too far to turn back. Not for them, not for revenge, but for the version of you that deserved better all along. The one who kept hoping even when hope felt foolish. The one who loved deeply, even when it wasn't returned. That person didn't lose, they evolved. And now they're living a life so strong, so unshakable, that the past doesn't stand a chance. This is your era, not of drama, not of pain, but of power. Quiet, steady, undeniable power. And it starts now. There's a moment, subtle, almost imperceptible, when you stop checking the past for answers and start building the future with your hands, not with grand gestures, not with declarations, but with the quiet, relentless consistency of someone who has finally stopped waiting to begin. You don't need permission anymore. You don't need closure. You don't need a sign. You've become the sign, the proof, the living answer to the question, can someone rise from this? Yes, and not just rise, rebuild, not just survive, thrive, not just move on. Move forward with purpose so clear, so undeniable, that the old pain begins to feel like a distant memory, not a defining wound. This is where most people hesitate. They feel the shift. They taste the freedom. But then they pause, afraid that if they truly let go, they'll lose a part of themselves, that letting go means forgetting, that healing means erasing what was. But that's not what this is. You're not erasing the past, you're redefining it. You're taking the pain and turning it into fuel, the betrayal into boundaries, the loneliness into self-reliance. Every scar becomes a lesson, every tear a testimony. And in that transformation, you don't lose yourself. You find a version of you that's stronger, wiser, and infinitely more free. You were never meant to carry the weight of someone else's inability to love you the way you deserved. That burden was never yours to hold. It was placed on your shoulders by silence, by indifference, by choices that had nothing to do with your worth. And now, as you set it down, not with anger, but with clarity, you feel what true lightness feels like. It's not the absence of memory. It's the presence of peace. It's waking up and realizing your thoughts don't race to the past. It's going a full day without wondering what they're doing. It's laughing deeply, not for show, but because joy has returned. Not because of someone else, but because of you. This is the power they never saw coming. Not because it's hidden, but because they were looking for weakness. They expected you to break, to beg, to come crawling back hoping for a crumb of attention. But you didn't. You did something far more dangerous. You grew. You invested in yourself when no one else did. You showed up for your healing when no one was watching. You chose therapy over rumination, goals over grief, self-respect over desperation. And in doing so, you changed the entire energy of your life. Not by fighting them, but by focusing on you. Because here's the truth. People don't leave because you weren't enough. They leave because they couldn't handle how much you had to give, your depth, your loyalty, your capacity to love fiercely, unconditionally, completely. That kind of love terrifies those who only know how to take. And when they walked away, they told themselves you were too intense, too emotional, too much. So they wouldn't have to face the truth. They were too afraid to stay. But you were never the problem. You were the gift. And gifts aren't meant to be wasted on those who don't appreciate them. They're meant to be protected, honored, given to someone who sees their value, starting with you. So you stop begging for loyalty from those who only know how to leave. You stop giving your energy to people who can't return it. You stop measuring your worth by someone else's inability to see it. And in that stillness, you build something unshakable. A life not centered around love, but around self-trust. Not focused on being chosen, but on choosing yourself every single day. That's the real strategy, not silence, not distance, but evolution, or becoming so aligned with your truth that the past can't pull you back. And when that happens, when you truly live as if your worth is non-negotiable, something shifts. Not because they notice, but because you do. You feel it in your chest, a quiet fire, a steady calm, a knowing so deep it doesn't need to be spoken. You are not waiting, you are not broken, you are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be, becoming the person your soul has been begging you to be. And that person, they don't look back, they don't hesitate, they don't beg for a second chance from someone who never gave them a first. They move forward with purpose, with power, with peace, and they don't stop. Not ever. There comes a day when you realize you're no longer angry, not because they've changed, not because they've apologized, but because your energy has shifted so completely that resentment no longer fits in your world. It feels foreign, heavy, unnecessary, like carrying a stone in your pocket long after the storm has passed. You don't need it anymore. You don't need the story of how you were wronged, how you were overlooked, how you were left behind. That story served its purpose. It kept you aware, it kept you fighting, it kept you from disappearing into silence without a fight. But now it's time to lay it down. Not because it wasn't real, but because you're building something realer, something stronger, something that doesn't need pain to exist. This is the quiet revolution. The moment you stop defining yourself by what was taken and start living from what remains, your strength, your clarity, your unshakable sense of self. You don't have to prove you've healed. You don't have to show anyone the progress. It radiates from you in the way you speak, calm, grounded, without the tremor of insecurity, in the way you love, not desperately, but wisely, in the way you move through the world, not seeking approval, but embodying worth. That's the transformation, not a sudden explosion of confidence, but a slow, steady reclamation of your inner authority. The day you stop asking, "Was I not enough?" and start living as if the answer has always been yes. You were never meant to stay small for someone else's comfort. You were meant to grow, even when it scared them, even when it made them leave. Because growth isn't always welcomed. It disrupts, it challenges, it exposes. And when you begin to rise, not just emotionally but energetically, those who only know how to live in the shadows will pull away. Not because you changed, but because you finally stopped hiding. And that's not a loss. That's a filter, a natural separation between those who want you diminished and those who celebrate your light. Let them go, not with bitterness, not with drama, but with silence so complete, so full of peace that it speaks louder than any words ever could. Because here's what they never expect. You don't come back with tears. You come back with stillness, with a presence so grounded, so self-assured that their chaos can't touch you. You don't need to say a word. You don't need to show them your success. They feel it in the space between you, in the way you hold eye contact without flinching, in the way you don't react, not because you're cold, but because you're free. That freedom, that's the ultimate power move, not cutting them off, not blocking them, but becoming someone they can no longer influence. Someone whose peace isn't dependent on their presence or absence. Someone who has outgrown the need for their attention entirely. And when that shift happens, when you stop measuring your progress by their reaction and start measuring it by your inner calm, everything changes. Not because of them, because of you. Because you've made the most dangerous decision of all, to choose yourself, not once, but every single day. To protect your energy like it's the last sacred thing you have. To build a life so full of purpose, so rich with meaning, that the past doesn't stand a chance. You don't need to announce your healing. You don't need to prove it. It shows in the way you wake up now. Not bracing for pain, but open to possibility. In the way you set goals that have nothing to do with love and everything to do with legacy. In the way you love, not less, but better. Not wider, but deeper. Because now you start with yourself. And from that foundation, everything else rises. This is your life, not a reaction, not a waiting room, not a second chance at something that failed. It's a first chance at something real, something true, something yours. So keep going. Not for them, not for revenge, but for the version of you that refused to die, the one who kept breathing, kept believing, kept choosing to rise, even when no one was watching. That person didn't just survive, they became unstoppable. And they're still rising, still building, still becoming, and they're not stopping now. There's a moment, not loud, not dramatic, but deep, when you realize you're no longer afraid of being alone. Not because someone finally stayed, not because you found a new love, but because you've discovered something far more rare, the comfort of your own presence. You can sit in silence now without reaching for a phone. You can walk through a room full of people and not search for someone to validate your existence. You can face the quiet and not run from it, because you've learned it's not emptiness you feel, but peace. And peace doesn't need to be filled. It needs to be honored. This is the final stage of real healing, not forgetting, not moving on, but moving forward with such clarity that the past no longer holds power. You don't suppress the memories. You don't pretend it didn't hurt, but you no longer let it dictate your rhythm. You've stopped asking why they left because you finally answered the only question that matters: who am I now? And the answer isn't shaped by their absence. It's shaped by your courage, your persistence, your refusal to let pain be the end of your story. You were never meant to be defined by someone else's inability to stay. You were meant to be defined by your ability to remain true, to remain strong, to remain kind without losing your edge, to remain open without losing your boundaries. That's the balance. That's the mastery. And it doesn't come from ignoring the pain. It comes from walking through it, eyes open, heart beating, choosing yourself at every turn. Not once, not occasionally, but consistently. Even when it felt foolish. Even when hope seemed naive. Even when every sign said, give up. You didn't. You kept going. Not because you had to, but because deep down you knew you were being prepared for a life that demands nothing less than your full presence. And now as you step into that life, you understand the most powerful truth of all. Love should not cost you yourself. It should not require you to shrink, to beg, to silence your voice, to betray your instincts. Real love for others, and more importantly for yourself, expands you. It gives you more room to breathe, not less. It doesn't drain your energy, it fuels it. And if what you're in right now feels like a constant sacrifice, a daily erosion of your spirit, then it's not love, it's attachment, it's habit, it's fear wearing the mask of connection. And you're too awake now to be fooled by that anymore. So you protect your energy like it's the last flame in a storm. You say no without guilt. You walk away without looking back. You choose peace over drama, growth over familiarity, truth over comfort. Not because it's easy, but because you've paid too high a price to keep making the same mistakes. You've cried too many tears in the dark. You've woken up too many mornings with your heart heavy from someone else's indifference. And you finally realized you don't have to earn the right to be happy. You were born with it. This is where real power lives. Not in control, not in manipulation, not in making someone regret. It lives in detachment, in the ability to care deeply but not dependently, to love fully but not desperately, to be present without being consumed. That's the strategy they never saw coming. Not silence, not distance, but inner freedom. The kind that doesn't react, the kind that doesn't flinch, the kind that stands in the fire and doesn't burn. And when you live from that place, when your worth is no longer negotiable, when your peace is non-negotiable, the universe responds, not with miracles, not with sudden luck, but with alignment. Opportunities appear, health improves, relationships shift. You attract not what you want, but what you are. And what you are now is someone who knows their value, someone who refuses to settle, someone who has been through the fire and come out not just intact, but illuminated. So keep going, not for them, not for proof, but for the life that's waiting, the one built on self-trust, purpose, and unshakable peace, the one where you don't need anyone's attention to feel alive, because you already are, fully, deeply, irrevocably alive. And no past pain, no absence, no loss can ever take that from you again. There's a quiet power in the moments no one sees. The mornings you choose stillness over scrolling, the nights you sit with your thoughts instead of numbing them, the seconds you feel the urge to reach out and you don't, not because you don't care, not because you've turned cold, but because you've made a deeper decision to honor the version of you that deserves peace, not punishment. And that choice, repeated over and over, becomes a force. Not loud, not aggressive, but undeniable. Like roots breaking through concrete, you're growing in silence, and nothing can stop what's already in motion. You don't need their apology to begin again. You don't need their regret to feel justified. You don't need them to see how far you've come. Because the truth is, you're not doing this for them. You're doing it for the part of you that refused to die, the part that kept breathing when your heart felt broken, the part that whispered, "Keep going," even when every signal said to quit. That voice, that quiet, persistent fire, is your soul speaking, and it's not asking for permission anymore. It's taking back what was stolen. Your time, your energy, your belief in yourself. This is where most people fail, not because they lack strength, but because they expect transformation to feel dramatic. They wait for a moment of sudden clarity, a breakthrough, a sign from the universe. But real change doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives in the small choices, the decision to drink water instead of wine, to go to bed early instead of chasing validation online, to delete a conversation instead of reopening old wounds. These aren't just habits, they're declarations. Each one says, "I am choosing me, I am worth the effort, I am no longer negotiable." And when you repeat them long enough, something shifts inside, not overnight, but steadily, irreversibly. You were never broken. You were buried under years of compromise, under the weight of loving too deeply in spaces that didn't deserve it. You gave your loyalty to people who treated it like a weakness. You offered your honesty to those who used it against you. And when it ended, you blamed yourself. But here's the truth no one told you. Love should not destroy you. It should not leave you questioning your worth. Real love, real connection, should make you feel seen, not small, protected, not punished. And if what you experienced felt more like survival than joy, then it wasn't love, it was a lesson. And the lesson was this: never again. Never again will you trade your peace for attention. Never again will you confuse intensity with intimacy. Never again will you let someone else's inability to stay define your ability to be enough. That realization, that boundary, is the real strategy. Not cutting them off, not going silent, but becoming so rooted in your self-worth that their energy no longer affects you. That's the power they never saw coming. Not because it's hidden, but because they were looking for weakness. They expected you to break, to beg, to come back smaller, quieter, more desperate. But you didn't. You did something far more dangerous. You healed in silence. You rebuilt in private. You became someone who doesn't need their attention to feel complete. And when you show up in the world like that, calm, grounded, unshaken, it disrupts everything. Not because you're trying to, but because authenticity is magnetic, and peace is terrifying to those who live in chaos. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to show them the life you've built. In fact, the most powerful transformations are never announced. They're simply lived. They're in the way you carry yourself now, not with arrogance, but with quiet confidence. In the way you set boundaries without apology. In the way you pursue goals that have nothing to do with love and everything to do with purpose. Because you're not trying to be chosen. You're trying to be free. And freedom isn't a destination, it's a daily decision, a refusal to let the past dictate your pace, a commitment to live not in reaction, but in intention. So keep going, not for them, not for revenge, but for the future you're building. Brick by brick, choice by choice, breath by breath. A life where peace isn't a goal, but a constant. Where love isn't a need, but a natural overflow of who you've become. That life is already happening, you're already living it, you just have to keep choosing it. Every single day. And when you do, when you stay loyal to yourself above all else, you become unstoppable. Not because you're perfect, but because you're finally free. And freedom, that's the only victory that matters. There is a silence that doesn't come from cutting someone off. It comes from no longer needing to explain yourself, from no longer feeling the urge to justify your choices, your pain, your boundaries. That silence, deep, complete, unshaken, is the sound of true inner authority. It's not avoidance, it's mastery. It's the moment you stop defending your worth and start living it so fully that no defense is needed. You don't argue, you don't react, you don't beg for understanding. You simply move with purpose, with peace, with a presence so grounded that the noise of the past can't reach you. And that's when you know the war is over. You didn't win by defeating them. You won by refusing to fight in their arena anymore. This is the final liberation, when you stop measuring your healing by whether they notice and start measuring it by how you feel when you're alone. When you realize that the most sacred space in your life isn't a relationship, a reunion, or a second chance. It's the space between your ears, the way you speak to yourself, the beliefs you carry, the promises you keep. Because no one can hurt you the way you can hurt yourself with doubt, with guilt, with the lie that you weren't enough. And the moment you stop repeating that lie, the moment you replace it with I am here, I am whole, I am enough, everything shifts. Not because the world changes, but because your foundation does. You were never meant to stay in the aftermath. You were meant to rise through it. Every heartbreak, every betrayal, every silent night spent wondering what went wrong. It wasn't proof you failed. It was proof you dared. You loved, you trusted, you showed up. And that courage, that's rare. Most people don't risk it. Most people protect themselves so fiercely they never feel anything real, but you did. And because you did, you got hurt. But hurt is not the opposite of growth. It's the price of it, and you've paid it, not in vain, but in full. And now the return on that pain is beginning to show in the way you carry yourself, in the way you set boundaries, in the way you no longer tolerate what you once accepted. This is where real power reveals itself, not in loud declarations, but in quiet consistency. In the mornings, you choose yourself even when you don't feel strong. In the nights, you stay silent when every fiber in your body wants to text, to beg, to reconnect. In the moments you feel the old ache and you don't run from it, you breathe into it, you acknowledge it, and then you keep walking. Because you've learned something most never do, healing isn't about erasing pain. It's about changing your relationship with it. Pain no longer controls you. It teaches you, it reminds you, and then it passes, not because you fought it, but because you stopped feeding it. You don't need their attention to feel alive. You don't need their regret to feel justified. You don't need them to come back to prove you matter. Your value was never theirs to give or take. It was always yours. And the longer you wait for someone to validate your healing, the longer you delay your freedom. So stop waiting, stop watching, stop hoping for a sign. The only sign you need is this: you're still here, still breathing, still choosing to rise even when it feels impossible. That's not just strength, that's power. And power doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't seek approval. It simply moves quietly, steadily, irreversibly toward the life you were meant to live. You are not broken. You are becoming. And becoming isn't a straight line. It's messy. It's emotional. It's full of setbacks and breakthroughs. But every step, even the ones that feel like falling, are moving you forward because you're not walking away from pain. You're walking into yourself. And when you finally arrive, when you stand in your truth without apology, without hesitation, you won't need to say a word. The world will feel it, not because you announced it, but because you've become someone who can no longer be ignored, not by force, but by presence. So keep going, not for them, not for revenge, but for the version of you that refused to die. The one who kept going when no one was watching. The one who chose peace over drama, growth over comfort, self-respect over desperation. That person didn't just survive, they became unbreakable. And they're still rising, still building, still becoming. And they're not stopping now. There comes a moment, soft, almost silent, when you realize you no longer need to prove anything. Not to them, not to the world, not even to yourself. The constant internal push to show that you've moved on, that you're happy, that you're better off, it fades, not because you've given up, but because you've arrived. Arrived at a place where your worth isn't something you defend, but something you simply live. You don't have to flex your success. You don't have to post your joy. You don't have to make them see what they lost, because you've stopped living in reaction. You're living in creation, building a life not to spite the past, but to honor the future. And that shift, subtle as it may seem, is the most powerful transformation of all. You were never meant to be small for someone else's comfort. You were meant to take up space, to speak your truth, to want deeply, to dream wildly. And when you began to do that, when you stopped apologizing for your needs, your boundaries, your intensity, some people left, not because you changed, but because you finally stopped pretending. And authenticity has a way of clearing the room. It doesn't push people away. It reveals who was never truly with you to begin with. And that's not a loss. That's liberation. Every person who can't handle your light was never meant to walk beside you. They were meant to show you how brightly you shine by their absence. This is where real strength shows up, not in the loud moments, but in the quiet ones, in the decision to rest when you're exhausted, instead of proving you're strong. In the choice to walk away from a conversation that drains you, instead of winning it. In the courage to say, I'm not okay, and still keep going. That's the real fight, not against them, not against the past, but for yourself, for the right to heal at your own pace, to grow in your own way, to define success not by external markers, but by inner peace. And when you start measuring your life this way, not by who's with you, but by how you feel when you're alone, everything begins to align. You don't need their regret to know you mattered. You don't need their return to know you were real. The love you gave was not wasted. It was expressed. And expression is never loss. It's courage. It's proof you were alive. And yes, it hurt when it wasn't returned. But that pain wasn't a sign you were foolish for loving. It was a sign you loved deeply. And that depth is a gift, not a flaw. The world doesn't need more people who protect their hearts at all costs. It needs more people like you, who loved, who got hurt, and still chose to rise without hardening, who healed without losing their softness, who grew without becoming someone they don't recognize. That's the strategy they never saw coming. Not silence, not distance, not success, but wholeness. Becoming so complete within yourself that their presence or absence no longer shifts your center. You don't ignore them out of bitterness. You simply don't think about them. Not because you've erased them, but because you filled your life with something more important: purpose, growth, presence. You wake up now not chasing validation, but creating value. Not seeking love, but embodying it. And when you live from that place, you become magnetic. Not because you're trying to attract anyone, but because authenticity is the most attractive force in the universe. You are not waiting for closure. You are closure. Every choice you make to protect your peace, to honor your truth, to invest in your future, that's the final word. Not a conversation, not a reunion, not a text, but the life you build after the storm. That's your answer. That's your power. And the most beautiful part, you don't have to show it to them. You don't have to prove it to anyone. Because real transformation isn't performed, it's lived quietly, consistently, unstoppably. So keep going. Not for them. Not for revenge, but for the version of you that deserves everything: peace, love, purpose, joy. The one who kept going when it hurt, who chose healing over hurting, who decided deep in the silence that they were worth fighting for. That person is you, and they're still rising, still becoming, still winning, not by returning, but by moving forward one quiet, powerful step at a time. There's a kind of strength that doesn't roar. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to. It shows up in the quiet moments, When you choose to walk away from a conversation that would have once consumed you, when you feel the old ache rise and you don't react, when you look in the mirror and meet your own eyes without flinching, that strength isn't built in a day. It's forged in the fire of repetition, in the 1,000 small choices to honor yourself, even when no one's watching, even when it's hard, even when the world tries to pull you back into old patterns. And now, without fanfare, it's simply who you are. Not someone trying to be strong, someone who is. You don't need to prove you've changed. You don't need to show anyone the life you've built. Because the truth is no longer something you defend, it's something you live. You wake up with a different rhythm. Your thoughts don't race to the past. Your heart doesn't jump at the sound of a notification. You move through the world with a calm that can't be faked, a presence that doesn't seek approval. And that's the real victory. Not that they see it, but that you feel it. The peace isn't external, it's internal. It's in your breath, in your posture, in the way you no longer carry tension in your shoulders like it's part of your identity. You've stopped bracing for pain, and in that release, you've found freedom. This is what happens when you stop trying to win back love and start reclaiming your life. You realize that the deepest wound wasn't their leaving, it was believing you were less because of it. That lie lived in your bones for so long. It made you question your worth, your beauty, your lovability. But now, slowly, steadily, you've replaced it. Not with arrogance, not with denial, but with truth. You are not broken. You are not unlovable. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You were simply too loyal to people who didn't know how to stay. Too kind to those who saw kindness as weakness. Too open to those who only knew how to take. And now, you protect your energy not out of fear, but out of respect. For yourself, for your journey, for the life you're building. You don't need their attention to feel alive. You don't need their regret to feel justified. You don't need them to come back to prove you matter. Your value was never theirs to give, it was always yours. And the longer you waited for someone to validate your healing, the longer you delayed your freedom. But now you've stopped waiting. You've stopped watching. You've stopped measuring your progress by their silence. Because you've learned the most powerful lesson of all, closure isn't something you get from someone else. It's something you create. It's the decision to stop letting the past dictate your present. It's the morning you choose your goals over your grief. It's the night you choose rest over rumination. It's the moment you realize you haven't thought about them in days. Not because you're suppressing it, but because your life is finally full of things that matter more. And that's the strategy they never saw coming. Not cutting them off, not going silent, but becoming someone they can't affect anymore. Not because you've built walls, not because you've hardened your heart, but because you've grown so deeply into yourself that their energy no longer reaches your core. You don't react, you don't wonder, you don't chase. You simply exist, calm, clear, unshaken. And that stillness, that's power. Not loud, not aggressive, but absolute. Because peace is the ultimate rebellion against chaos. And when you live in peace, you disrupt every narrative they ever had about you. So keep going. Not for them, not for revenge, but for the future you're building. One choice, one breath, one moment at a time. A life where love isn't a need, but a natural overflow of who you are. Where connection isn't a search for completion, but a celebration of wholeness. That life is already here. You're already living it. You just have to keep choosing it. Every single day. With every quiet act of courage. With every moment you choose yourself. That's how you win. Not by returning, not by proving, but by rising again and again and again until the past can't even whisper your name. There's a moment, not dramatic, not marked by music or tears, when you realize you're no longer afraid of being forgotten. Not because you've convinced yourself it doesn't matter, but because you've become someone worth remembering, simply by being true to yourself. You don't need their memory to validate your existence. You don't need to linger in their mind to feel real. Your life is happening now, fully, deeply, without their presence. And that alone is proof that you've moved beyond the need for their attention. You're not trying to stay in their story. You're too busy writing your own. This is the quiet revolution of self-worth. When you stop measuring your value by how much someone else wanted you and start measuring it by how much you honor yourself, the way you speak to yourself in private, the way you protect your time, the way you walk away from anything that dims your light, not with anger, but with quiet certainty. That's the real power. Not revenge, not success, not a new relationship, but the unshakable knowing that you are enough, Not despite your past, but because of how you've risen from it. Every scar, every lesson, every silent night of healing has shaped you into someone deeper, wiser, more grounded than before. And no one can take that from you. Not even the person who tried. You were never meant to stay in the shadow of someone else's choices. You were meant to step into your own light. Not to blind anyone, but to see clearly. To move forward without hesitation. To love without losing yourself. And now, as you do, you begin to attract a different energy, not because you're searching, not because you're trying to replace what was lost, but because energy follows identity. When you become peace, you draw in peace. When you become clarity, you repel chaos. When you stop begging for loyalty, you naturally attract those who know how to stay, not because you changed for them, but because you changed for you. And that's the most magnetic force in the universe, authenticity lived without apology. This is where most people hesitate. They get close to freedom, so close they can taste it, and then they pause. One message, one look at a profile, one "I just want to know why." And just like that, they're back in the cycle. Because healing isn't about never feeling the pull. It's about feeling it and not acting on it. It's about recognizing the old voice that says maybe this time, and answering with silence, or with stillness, with a choice so deep it bypasses emotion. I'm done, not angry, not bitter, done. And that decision, repeated every time the urge returns, is what rewires your nervous system, what teaches it that you are safe, that you are whole, that you no longer need what once broke you. You don't need to prove you've healed. You don't need to show them the life you've built. In fact, the most powerful transformations are never announced. They're simply lived. They're in the way you set boundaries without guilt, in the way you pursue goals that have nothing to do with love and everything to do with purpose, in the way you wake up now, not bracing for pain, but open to possibility. That's the real strategy. Not cutting someone off, not going silent, but becoming so aligned with your truth that their absence no longer creates a void. You filled that space with self-respect, with growth, with a life so full, so rich, so undeniably yours that the past doesn't stand a chance. And when that happens, when you stop looking back for closure and start moving forward with conviction, something shifts in the universe. Not because they notice, but because you do. You feel it in your chest. A quiet fire. A steady calm, a knowing so deep it doesn't need to be spoken. You are not waiting, you are not broken, you are not behind. You are exactly where you need to be, becoming the person your soul has been begging you to be. And that person? They don't look back, they don't hesitate, they don't beg for a second chance from someone who never gave them a first. They move forward with purpose, with power, with peace, and they don't stop, not ever. Because the greatest revenge isn't them seeing what they lost. It's you living a life so full, so free, so unshakable that their absence doesn't even register. That's the win, that's the rise, that's the life. And it's already yours. You just have to keep choosing it. There's a quiet moment, unannounced, almost unnoticed, when you realize you no longer feel the need to explain your silence. You don't owe anyone the story of your healing. You don't owe them your pain, your growth, or the reasons you walked away. And in that release, you find one of the most liberating truths. You are not required to make others understand your journey. Your peace is not negotiable. Your boundaries are not up for debate. Your evolution is not a performance. It's a private revolution. And it belongs only to you. This is where real power settles. Not in confrontation, not in proving you've moved on, but in the deep, unshakable calm of living your truth without apology. You don't need their recognition to know you've changed. You don't need their regret to feel justified. You don't need them to see how far you've come, because you feel it. In the way you breathe now, deeper, slower, freer. In the way you carry yourself, not with pride, but with presence. In the way you love, not less, but wiser. You've learned that love without self-respect is just another form of loss, and you're done with loss. Done with settling, done with giving your energy to people who can't return it. You were never the problem. You were the wake-up call. The kind of person who loved deeply, spoke honestly, showed up fully, and in doing so, revealed the emotional limitations of those around you. When you loved too much, it wasn't because you were desperate. It was because you were capable. When you stayed too long, it wasn't because you were weak. It was because you believed in second chances, in growth, in the possibility of change. And that belief, that's not foolish. It's rare. It's beautiful. But it's also dangerous, because not everyone is ready for that kind of love. Not everyone can handle the weight of someone who sees their potential and refuses to let them live beneath it, so they leave. Not because you were too much, but because they were too afraid to become more. And now, as you step into your new rhythm, you understand the deepest act of rebellion is self-honoring. It's saying no without guilt. It's walking away without looking back. It's choosing your peace over their comfort. It's building a life so aligned, so authentic, that the past can't pull you back. Not because you've forgotten, but because you've outgrown it. You don't suppress the memories. You don't pretend it didn't hurt, but you no longer let it dictate your pace. You've stopped asking why they left because you finally answered the only question that matters: who am I now? And the answer isn't shaped by their absence. It's shaped by your courage, your persistence, your refusal to let pain be the end of your story. This is the strategy they never saw coming. Not silence, not distance, not success, but wholeness. Becoming so complete within yourself that their presence or absence no longer shifts your center. You don't ignore them out of bitterness. You simply don't think about them, not because you've erased them, but because you've filled your life with something more important: purpose, growth, presence. You wake up now not chasing validation, but creating value, not seeking love, but embodying it. And when you live from that place, you become magnetic. Not because you're trying to attract anyone, but because authenticity is the most attractive force in the universe. You are not waiting for closure. You are closure. Every choice you make to protect your peace, to honor your truth, to invest in your future, that's the final word. Not a conversation, not a reunion, not a text, but the life you build after the storm. That's your answer. That's your power. And the most beautiful part, you don't have to show it to them. You don't have to prove it to anyone. Because real transformation isn't performed. It's lived, quietly, consistently, unstoppably. So keep going. Not for them, not for revenge, but for the version of you that deserves everything. Peace, love, purpose, joy. The one who kept going when it hurt. Who chose healing over hurting. Who decided deep in the silence that they were worth fighting for. That person is you. And they're still rising, still becoming, still winning. Not by returning, but by moving forward. One quiet, powerful step at a time.